Hi, I am today recording a session where I'm going to guide someone into learning about the Vipassana meditation. Do you want to start with introducing yourself, or do you want to just let us just jump into the session?
Just jump in. Yeah, I'm Liz. Hello.
Well, I would like to just start by asking you, um, what are why do you feel drawn to learning this, and what are your most like what's your first questions that comes to mind?
Drawn to learning Vipassana. Is that how you say it?
Vipassana. Mm.
Vipassana. Because I find it difficult to settle. And I've known a few friends who have went and discovered many things after doing it. Um, I think because I think so much it would help with stilling my mind a bit, at least bring some kind of order to it. And so that's what's drawn me to it.
Can
Um,
I want to jump in straight away, and then we continue. I got so excited what you're saying. It's so beautiful to have you on because it's going to be so easy for me to guide because you have so beautiful instincts. So first of all, the way I pronounce it might actually not be right, like so. That's not the important thing. I usually just say meditation. So the reason why I added that word is because it is to set people into the mindset of this type of meditation.
yeah,
Because many of them, they meditate, they use apps, they use mantras, or they're trying to accomplish something. And the difference is that in Vipassana, your purpose is just to be with yourself and the breath. So that is why I'm using that word. But in general, I don't use that name for the meditation.
sure.
And when it comes to thinking, that's why I wanted to jump in and say. So this might be news for you, or you might know it. Every human has around 60 to 80,000 thoughts every day. 80, around 80,000, between 60 and 80,000. But majority of those thoughts are repetitive. So they just go like over and over. And the majority of those thoughts, we don't even think about that we're thinking them. They're just there. So everyone has a lot of thoughts. So that's what I wanted to jump in with.
Yes.
and and the focus of this type of meditation is not to have you stop thinking, because this is a beautiful suggestion box. So it's rather about becoming aware of our thoughts, and also most importantly to get a distance, so that we're not identifying that I am what I'm thinking,
Okay.
if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So because if you want to stop thinking, that would basically be brain dead.
Yeah.
And it's much more efficient to just knock your head on the wall until you pass out if you want to stop thinking.
Mhm.
Because so I just want to jump super quick, already say as well. If you're doing a 30 minutes meditation in this way, and if you the whole 30 minutes are just thinking, that is just as successful as if you're in some kind of blissful state. So the whole purpose with this meditation is, again, to get a distance, that you start to observe, not observe, but you start to observe your thinking. And that's
Yeah.
when you can start to kind of direct more. But the most important thing is to get a distance to your thinking.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Mm. Something Did something come up for you then, or do you have more questions to pop on there?
Well, I just felt like possibly I think I need to feel connection with my body. I think that when you mentioned about how everyone has up to 80,000 thoughts a day and they're not always controlled, or just they just happen. I then sort of realized that it's actually like a disconnect with my body, perhaps, always busy moving and all the rest of it, but not actually sitting at peace and being happy in that, you know.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another beautiful awareness. And it's an awareness that people can go years and years and years without noticing, or even their whole life. So it's really beautiful that you feel that. And the reality is that most people are trapped in their minds.
Yeah.
Most people are so busy. So, but I also see that a lot of people actually get too much into meditation, meaning that they get, so we can get stuck in our mind, but we can also get stuck in trying to escape our mind.
Yeah.
And that is, so a lot of people are so busy with ascending,
Yeah.
that they actually forget that we're here with a human body. And in my perspective, that's why we as humans, because we all have this tendency, so why I think many of us just keep coming back over and over and over is because, we get so busy trying to ascend, and then it's like, oh darn it, I was supposed to be a human. Okay, I'll go back and try another time.
Yeah, I get that.
So I think it's important for everyone usually to practice this type of meditation for a certain amount of time. And for some, maybe they need to do it the rest of their lives, because some are so much into different kinds of energies that they need to be reminded of being that in the mental present. And if you think about the archetypes, for instance, someone who is very, very strong in their, for instance, their dark feminine, and continue to be there, they can often need to ground by having this kind of meditation, so they also can strengthen their light masculine. So for me, back to archetypes, and I'm not going to speak too much about that since this video is supposed to be guiding and meditation, but still, so for me in the archetypes, the light masculine, which is the mental plane, is what basically one is training by this type of meditation. And so that is the mental capacity to view your own thoughts and to use your thoughts and your mental capacity for a bigger purpose. So you basically like, eagle eye, you're watching everything. But it's really important then to start to be a human. So for me, for instance, I bring now what I trained my energy and my mind for a long time with this type of meditation. I bring this to my everyday. So I don't often sit down anymore in this type of meditation, because for me, I'm constantly kind of putting presence to my everyday life. So that is my intention and my desire with this type of meditation, is to start that tool. And usually one would need to practice this type of meditation for maybe a year or more, preferably a bit more, until one can get it so much into your system that you start to practice it during your day. Because if you're just sitting down once, twice a day and doing this meditation, but you're not bringing into your life, it's basically like going on a diet where you stop eating chocolate for 1 hour and then you're eating chocolate the rest of the day. The purpose is not to stop thinking. The purpose is not to attain any kind of trance or anything. The purpose is with this type of meditation, and the way I'm guided and taught it, like a very pure mindfulness, the original mindfulness, not the popular mindfulness, is to be better at life. So it is not to stop thinking. I'm going to keep saying that. And it's not to become anything else, but being more fully present in your life here and now.
Sounds good to me.
Any more questions or comments?
I'm just curious as to what kind of thoughts will come up into my head when I'm alone with them,
Yeah. And that's the thing. So in the beginning of my meditation journey, I, at certain intervals, was feeling like I was going crazy. So first of all, when we start to meditate, it's actually good to go a bit slow. Okay. Because when we're starting to observe what's in our subconscious, unless we're prepared, and I'm preparing now, so already by how much I'm sharing, it's going to be easier. But no one shared this amount of things with me in the beginning. And so, but it is actually like opening up, into your deep subconscious when you do this kind of meditation. And the point is not to go too quickly, but let your energy and your mind gradually open. And I'm going to speak into now why. So in the beginning, when I was meditating, I used a mantra. So in the beginning, I was trained in transcendental meditation. I had some really beautiful experiences in terms of it radically transformed my life in the beginning. What I also started experiencing when I was drawn to learning a new type of meditation is that when you're using a mantra, or when you're using an app, or when you're using any kind of goal orientation in it, very quickly you can start to really just develop a different kind of ego pattern. So for me, the purpose of meditation is to start to be aware of my ego patterns, whereas these ideas and identity of who I am and how I think and conditioning. So it's becoming aware of all these little programs we have in our mind. But if you're using an app, it's someone else who is guiding us in their pace, in their viewpoint. And if we're trying to achieve something, if we're trying to achieve a trance or certain kinds of things, we are not honoring our bodies. It's like it's just saying to parts of ourselves, oh, we don't have time for you now because we're supposed to get there.
Yeah. It limits it. Sounds like it limits it.
Yeah. And mantras are also kind of the same. So they tend to dig into your subconscious. And they can also then kind of be another program. So by this, I'm not saying that other types of meditations are necessarily bad, but I am saying that they do have certain amount of potential drawbacks and challenges and problems. Whereas as far as I know, an experience, the only problem you can have with this type of meditation is that if you're starting to sit too long, meaning that if you're sitting like I did at one time, 2 hours or more per day, you can potentially start to open up so much inside of you that you don't know how to deal with it. Okay. So, and for some, this is not a problem. And for others, like my energy go very quickly deep. So for me, and in the beginning, I was told you're not allowed to practice more than twice a day for 20 minutes. Sometimes this type of meditation is extremely painful. Also for people that have meditated for quite some time. Sometimes it feels like 3 minutes is 30 minutes. And sometimes you're supposed to sit for 30 minutes and it's gone 50 minutes without you noticing it. But it is most common, in particular in the beginning, that it feels really painful. And there's no different value to meditation where it's gone easy as where it's gone being a pain in the ass and you keep thinking, I don't want to do this anymore. Because the purpose is to observe that you're thinking. And so it's just as well if you've been writing subconsciously an email and hate it every second than as if you've been 30 minutes of in this kind of different experience. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I've got what you mean. It's important to be able to observe and be the witness of self as opposed to like still staying in the mind. It's good to stand outside of yourself, regardless of whether you're going, oh, I hate this.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So yeah, definitely.
So I'm going to just say a little bit about basics of the ego mind.
Okay.
This might be news for you, or you might know it already. So the way I've been taught it is that basically we have 3 brains. So they're not 3 brains, but they're 3 parts of the brain. So first we have the reptilian part, which is basically, it's like a super primal brain. And for this video, I'm just going to make it super practical, normal words. I'm not going to use any fancy words. So I'm just going to say reptilian brain. And this is the same as, snake has. And it's very, very basic. And it really just operates the majority of our body, heart rate and, the basic functions of our body. And its primary focus is to survive. And it's, again, very, very basic. So in some ways, to put it very crudely and very basic, it operates if being worried about being killed and either escaping or killing, as in fighting back. Mm. So it's very quickly to get to the knife. It very quickly wants to dash away. It's very reactive. And this part of us can become even more reactive if we're brought up in an environment that was not safe. And I think all of us, to some kind of degree, has experienced unsafeness in our childhood and also as adults. And then on top of that, you have the mammal brain. And the mammal brain, for instance, we also share with dogs and other mammals. It's a lot of the same. And this is, again, pretty basic, but it comes more down to food as nourishment and to put it crudely again, sex. So it's a bit like thinking, can I eat it or can I fuck it? It's very, it's very, very much. Of course, there's more than just that. It's also that part that wants to cuddle and just have a collective, it's very tribal as well. But it's tribal as we versus them. It's very kind of, again, you can think of as the mammals again. And then you have the neocortex, which is the new brain that only humans have, as far as we know. I'm sure others around in other planets and whatever have this and much more advanced brain part. But this part is have the capacity to be spiritual. It has the capacity to think of science. It has the capacity to think of the greater good for everyone and not just your closest family or closest tribe. And I tend to think of this as the part that just wants to hold hands and sing kumbaya. So, and then you have these three parts of our brain that is very, very different. One of them wants to kill or run, one wants to eat or fuck, and then the other just wants the best or think spiritually. And the chatter between these three parts of the brain, you can roughly say, is the ego mind. So the ego mind tends to have a wide variety of suggestions. So this you can start to think of as your suggestion box. It comes with suggestions all the time. So the reptilian brain will often suggest that you should kill or run away, and then the mammal brain would be like, oh, I want food now, or I want to cuddle, or I want sex, or ooh, that person doesn't give me, I know that. And then you have on top of that wants to think, in the higher aspect of what it means to be a human. And this chatter between these three parts, most of it we're not aware. We are not aware. But if there is any kind of disagreement, usually the reptilian brain will win because it's about basic survival. So I don't know, was this news to you or was it?
Yeah, some of it I didn't. I mean, I knew about the reptilian brain, but I didn't know about the mammal brain or the neocortex. Was it neo? Yeah. So that was interesting to know that there was a dynamics there going on. What the other parts were, other than the reptilian one. So yeah, I could think, I could totally get it. I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah. So majority of what we're thinking, we're not aware of. I'm going to say again, 60 to 80,000 thoughts, and most of it are repetitive. I can't say that word. Repetitive.
Repetitive.
Yeah. So It's a bit early in the morning for me here in Mexico, so my tongue hasn't started talking too much yet. So it's, and the majority as well of what we think of certain things are actually created by the time we're 7 years old, and very solid by the time we're 9 years old. So when we're 7, we're still very much just like a extension of our parents, actually. And then we start to gradually become more individuals after 7. And then in the teenage years, we tend to try and create our own kind of identity through rebellion, etc. However, often we're not really allowed by society or parents or teachers to create this into stepping fully into our own. And so the reality is that the majority of how we operate in our daily lives and how we think is based on our parents and our school and our early caregivers, until we start to become aware and we start to question things. And again, we notice these kind of programs, I call it programs that's happening in our minds, like, where did that thought come from? Why do I think that? So that is a gift of for instance, of meditation. You start to, instead of just thinking or instead of just acting, you're starting to actually see the incoming programs. And then maybe sometimes we agree with those programs. So sometimes maybe we will still choose the same action and still live in the same way. But it's also a different thing to choose something because we actually were choosing it, or if something is just, we're just doing it on autopilot. And the reality is that most of our lives, we're actually just on autopilot. And this autopilot that we have is really great in a lot of ways. It's why we don't have to learn how to walk every day. Can you imagine if we had to learn how to walk, use knife or fork? And the same as, I'm sure anyone who drives a car can relate to how difficult it was in the beginning. And then suddenly now, you've been driving 30 minutes, everything is just going smooth and you don't even think about what you're doing. It's like, wow, like driving 30 minutes, it's just so automatic. So this is the gift that, this is how we can actually be advanced that we are. This is why we can have science, this is why we can have progress. But it is also responsible for us doing a lot of repeat of what our parents are doing, repeat of what society is doing, just continuing, including how difficult it can be to change a habit, because we are actually creatures of habit by how we are set up in our energy.
Yeah, I remember when I started to notice these things about the perpetuating the cycles of parents, and then thinking, nah. I know what you mean. Some, yes, but a lot of them are, for me, certainly has been, nah. No, I'm glad I can see that I'm my own person, making my own decisions, not based upon, I'm not saying I've got, all of them, but I know I haven't, but certainly when it first started happening, it was just as you said, it was like that noticing of, wait a minute, that isn't me, that's someone else.
I think I've always, to a certain degree, been my own person. But what also really revolutionized me was to understand how much also a lot of my actions were despite of, meaning that I was doing the opposite of my parents or the opposite of my teachers or the opposite of society. Choosing the opposite is actually still being controlled. For me, it was pretty revolutionary when I started this, and it was also in the beginning kind of frustrating, because as I was starting to really observe all things that were happening in my head and in my mind, and there was so much crazy going on inside here. I mean, That's the thing that is really wild, is that no wonder that humans love reality shows and movies and these fairy tale adventure books and etc., or drama and stuff, because the reality is that all of that lives inside of our mind. It's so much drama here. It's
Mm.
it's really really very, when you start to have more distance to it, it gets highly amusing. And what I would then suggest is, what's worked for me is to say, oh, thank you for the suggestion. So I'm not trying to, I don't put any kind of value to myself based on what's coming up in my mind.
Okay.
But that took a little while to really be there, because again, this more you start to observe and the more you start to allow everything to come up, the deeper you go, meaning that you're starting to get deep into even the reptilian brain that is really violent, that is really like having these crazy ideas. And is that part that we are not what we're thinking, we are what we're choosing to act upon.
Mm.
When you start to practice meditation, is that if you notice that you're starting with, I do not want that, that is code for, I'll put it in the shadow box and it would subconsciously rule my life. It will be like popping up, you know? That is, and it's a natural part of in the beginning, and it still happens throughout life, is that you will notice the things that I want that and I do not want that. So anytime we're trying to, oh, I don't want to think that, or that is something else than saying, oh, thank you for the suggestion. I'm going to go with another, but thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah, I see how that could shift it energetically. That is something similar. It's like anything that comes up that's like that I don't want to act upon, or that feels silly, or that would be intrusive to someone else. It's like I always find it more useful when I can actually ask more questions about that to myself. You know, why? What does that mean? How? What? Where does the emotion from that come from? You know, what is the emotion attached to that? It's like when something that I don't want comes into my mind, that I don't want that, it always, to me, is like an opportunity. I'm not saying that every time I'm able to scrutinize it, but it's an opportunity to really delve into what that is, where it comes from, what's rooted with it, you know. So probably a different way of describing it, but when you were talking about that, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's like gold, isn't it? It's
Mm.
like gold.
Can I say something directly addressed to that?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, go for it.
So the hugest gift for me eventually is starting to realize that we tend to mix emotions, thoughts, and action. So thinking angry thought is not an angry emotion.
Ah, right, okay. Yeah, yes.
And so if parts of me saying kill that person or push that person or run, this person is not good, that is not an emotion, that is a thought. And that is a thought based on maybe something that's happening inside of my body. So maybe it's a thought based on an emotion. Maybe, for instance, my energy gets activated. Maybe I feel parts of my energy feels unsafe around a person. And that could be because that person maybe is unsafe, or it can be based on me having an experience another time that triggers my nervous system.
Mhm.
But the most important thing is to actually not take what's happening here too seriously. Put attention to what's happening in the body. I practiced meditation for quite some time, and then I started with embodiment, which is a feminine type of meditation where we're just practicing being with our emotions. And I suggest to do both. If you want to just really just jumpstart and get like straight into it, do both things at once. And because this is again is a meaning making machine, it's a suggestion box. So based on what's happening in the body, the mind will start to give suggestions of what to do or how to interpret the situation.
Hmm.
But it's fully possible to start to practice first noticing your body, so you can actually stop having so much suggestions and even have just the experience of the emotion in your body without having much thoughts or even any thoughts. That is actually entirely possible. So yeah, a part of this type of practice is, again, to not take too seriously what's happening here. Did that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Because, and I'm speaking as a person who used to be totally caught up in my own mind. Like I would totally be in many ways a prisoner of my own mind. And it's such a different thing when the focus is always bringing back to the body. And for me, that's why I'm physically walking, touch myself as a way of just bringing my attention back to the body. Because we tend to think that this is what is sensing, but it's our body that's sensing. It's our body that senses. And then, based on our programs, this mind will interpret what we're sensing. And mostly of the things we're sensing, it will just diminish and just stand into the subconscious of not important, or we don't focus on that. And then, so the more we're starting to actually become aware of our thoughts and tapping into our true body, we will actually start to notice that how we perceive the world will change. And part of this thing is that I was practicing meditation for 2.5 years until I suddenly realized that I'm very psychic. But the thing is that my mind just dismissed all these magical things that happen in my life. It totally dismissed my instincts, it dismissed my intuition, and it dismissed that I would naturally see colors like aura, that I would, all these kind of other kinds of sensing that I would pick up in my energy field. But my mind, because I was trained as an engineer and got like a very kind of academic way, so my mind would just filter it away. And then when I just suddenly realized it, now what I'm picking up is quite different than how it was, let's say, 4 years ago, 10 years ago, and etc. This was not part of my mindfulness meditation, but what I find very practical to add in the beginning before a meditation is to actually start with the senses. And the only reason why I'm doing this is not because the senses is important, but because most people have a lot of unease and stress in their body. And so by focusing on the senses first, it can be easier to drop into relaxation in the body. If you feel like you're ready always to jump into meditation, you don't have to do this part. So this is just something for if you have a day, you know it's going to be extra difficult, or if you're a person that's looking at this that you will generally find it difficult, this can support you. So first of all, if you're really uneasy, but you know that meditation is going to be good, I would start by just standing up and shaking and just like really trying to get things out of your system. Because we don't need to, this type of meditation is not about being, putting yourself into strain. You're allowed to make it easier on yourself. So first, before closing the eyes, just notice a bit what's around you. Listen to sounds. Tune in a bit to your body. Just let your mind actually scatter a bit. Just let your mind and your body be a bit scattered. And then closing down your eyes. You do not have to meditate with closed eyes, but the thing is that our eyesight takes about 70% of the attention. So it tends to be much more difficult to concentrate. And then when you're closing down your eyes, you can just start to become aware of what you're seeing through the eyelids. Sometimes you will see like things dancing down in front of your eyelid. Sometimes you can see things through your eyelids. Sometimes there's light. And I want to add that there's no need to have darkness when you meditate. It can be good to have like a slight lower light, but in the beginning, I was meditating outside in the middle of daylight, in the middle of people. So it's when the purpose is to just become better at life, the purpose will defeat itself if you're always inside of a dark, quiet room. And then I wanted to become aware of your posture. Just trying to have a straight spine. Straight, but in a comfortable, relaxed way. And just putting attention, breathing up and down your spine. And now put attention to what you're hearing. Is there any loud noises? Is there any subtle noises? I want you to put attention to your mouth. Do you feel any taste in your mouth? Maybe you're eating something. Just whatever taste is in your mouth, just acknowledge it. Become aware of how it feels to have the clothing on top of your body. Your ass connecting with the ground and what you're sitting on. And now moving the attention to your breath and where the breath is coming out through your nose. The gentle awareness of this breath. And then after 2 seconds or 1 minute, your mind is going to start to think. Maybe it will say, this is boring. Maybe it want to start thinking about what to do afterwards. So every time you're thinking, you're just going to notice that you're thinking and you're going to gently put your attention back to your breath. You're going to let the breath, it takes its own natural rhythm. You're not going to force it in any way. So we're just going to talk a little bit more about meditation. So Liz shared that she had some experiences you wanted to share.
Yeah, I was like I was focusing on the breath in, breath out more than the breath in, and very quickly I was like, I had pictures and scenes and things that I didn't recognize, but I'm sure they're part of my subconscious, but things happening and normal things and people and the backs of people, and then I would quickly kind of come out of it and then again focus on the breath. It was like little interludes of things coming in scenes with colors, and then back to the breath after a bit of yeah, it was almost like dropping off to sleep, but not dropping off to sleep, but still
Yeah,
being aware of my body.
yeah,
It was amazing, like completely. It's just bizarre as well at the same time, you know.
yeah. So what you're
Very deep,
experiencing,
very deep.
yeah. So what you're experiencing then is you're starting to, when we meditate, we actually let our brain do a little bit of cleanup.
Yeah.
So it's really, and sometimes it can be really hard to stay present in the meditation because maybe you're coming up revolutionary things, or maybe it just feels like, oh, this is an interesting thought and I want to keep thinking. And
Yeah.
that's normal. It can be a real challenge that when we're sitting down to meditate, that we think we have beautiful ideas and things seem so important. And sometimes they are, but actually a lot of the time, they're not important. As what I separate between is that meditation to become more aware of a thought, it is just coming back to the breath. There's no stopping to write down anything. There's no, oh, that is so interesting. It's part of the practice is to learn that kind of structure of just coming back to your breath. It's like, okay, because the thing is, if something is really important, it will come back to us later.
Mhm.
So it's that kind of piece of, okay, it's interesting, we're here. And because this is what you're training then is awareness. It will make you a better listener. It will make you a better mom. It will make you a better human because in a conversation, you will start to learn to have the awareness of being in the moment. It's like, imagining you're sitting there. I'm sure you can relate. You're sitting there with your child and suddenly you have a new inspiration, you know? Yeah, it's a little bit like, well, now I'm mommy. So
Yeah.
sometimes we can ask our kids, like, okay, can I write this down?
Mm.
But not if our kid or if our lover or if our best friend or if our client is in the middle of something. So learning, this is what you can really just think in the back of your mind. Everyone who's listening to this kind of thing is about learning to be present in the moment. And for instance, me as a therapist, this is when I'm sitting there listening to someone and I'm being present with them. Sometimes my mind comes online and come with a suggestion, and I just notice it and I just back to the moment. And I'm really good at that. And that is why, for instance, I'm a safe place for people to share the deepest things because even though it's a great idea, I'm not going to run around with that idea. I come back and I'm present. So just like, I'm present and with my nose.
I'm not very good at that yet.
Well, all of us struggle with it, really. And that's again why meditation is such a beautiful tool because
Mm.
we start to have that deep presence. Because our ego mind tends to be so preoccupied with the past or the future, but
Yeah.
we're actually missing what's
It's
real.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, because the only thing that's real is right here and now. That's the only thing that's real.
Yeah, that's true. That's so. I really felt that during it because it was like maybe it was because the instruction, or maybe it's because I understood the instruction. I don't know, but it
Yeah,
was
you did
like
good.
I'm going. Oh, I'm back. I'm going. Oh, I'm back. You know,
Yeah,
and it was really. I didn't appreciate that so much until doing that. Usually I go off and I don't come back, you know, and so
yeah,
that was really, really good. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. I
And
appreciate it.
sometimes I practice that just taking myself on a ride, but then I'm not sitting down to meditate. Then it's a very distinct thing. So I use a lot of trance. in my life. Now, in the beginning, when I started practicing, I could actually sometimes be gone for hours. And I would astral walk and I would experience things and I would do a lot of these deep kind of experiences inside of in my energy. Now, usually I can lie down and it's 5 or 10 minutes and it's like hours. So that is a separate thing. So if there's a lot of things you want to explore in your inner world, you can totally lie down and have that experience. And the difference is that in this type of meditation, we're sitting. It's best to have something supporting your back. We're having a rather straight spine, but we're not in the military, but we have a straight spine, straight relaxed spine, making sure that we sit well. Usually, it's also good to have some kind of blanket or something to either throw over yourself or to add if you start to get cold, because don't underestimate of how quickly you can actually get quite cold.
Yeah.
And then if you do have kids or family, if it's a possibility, I would close the door and saying that, a mommy is taking mommy or puppy or whatever, or maybe you have dogs or cats, whoever is watching this. I do suggest that you try and not be directly interrupted like that. But it's also really amazing, as I shared in the beginning, to also start to practice meditation in public if you want to have like learning this deep presence. And sometimes I would sit down in with lights and make a different experience of it. However, it can also then become a little bit difficult to get out of the meditation. So just be aware of that if you're making it too dark. And it can also be different to relate the experience you have in meditation can be more difficult to integrate into your life if it's always about being dark and quiet and cozy. So I was actually meditating quite often with my kid. She was sleeping and then maybe I had a hand over her, and when she was getting older, she could be more like around and I didn't have to watch her all the time. I would also meditate. And sometimes she would sleep on my lap. And sometimes it worked well, and other times it was no possible to do it. So, but I was alone with a small child when I started to meditate this way. So I will say that it is it's possible for most people to accomplish.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, but to not make it into needing to be perfect. And at the same time, if you're having thinking for 20 minutes, it's just as beautiful as 20 minutes of
I can relate.
yeah. And I suggest not to use an alarm, because you got a little bit experience of that when I asked you to come out of it. It's
Yes.
like when we can be deep into it, it can be very startling to just be if it's an alarm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and in the beginning, the way I was taught was to use, but you can use your phone, but then you just turn off all notifications. But I would suggest again to actually not use your phone if you have the possibilities. If you do have more like an old-fashioned kind of clock or something that is just showing the time, but not have any kind of you don't, because our phone we tend to have a lot of personal connection with, So and first I would advise 15 minutes. If you never practiced anything like this before, you can start with 10 minutes. And I do advise to do it twice a day with 10 minutes, or once a day 15 minutes. And it can seem horrible, I know that, but it's better to just start with a little bit of more time than just 5 minutes, because if you allow yourself to just feel how difficult it is, it actually becomes easier to know that don't worry, it feels difficult for everyone at times.
Yeah.
And then, so what you do before you start is that, for instance, this is an air condition and it has like the time. I didn't know, but it can have. So if you have something that's time, you just do the math before you start. So for instance, if you go to 10 minutes or 15 minutes, you just note time and okay, when is that? I'm finished. And then if you're starting to wonder about borrowed time, you can just glance a little bit down and then just continue. So that is what I suggest.
Okay.
And if you worry about getting into losing track of time, you can add then an alarm. So you can add an alarm and then add some extra minutes so that you don't have to worry. So you're not sitting there wondering and anxious about that. I do suggest to add if possible so that you can have some extra time, because if you suddenly getting into a nice flow, you know, it's sad to have to quit it because you put on an alarm.
Yeah.
Do you have any more questions? Or
No, it was more like the interesting part of what it felt like to be in the flow, yet getting pulled out and back again. And I think I'm glad you said it's not important necessarily what comes up, because if it's really important, it will come back in different forms, you know. Because sometimes I do feel like I feel like a trigger with things like, oh, that must be important, or oh, this must be something I need to develop, or you know, like a drawing a picture or something, you know. So it's good to be told to, you don't have to hang on to it. I think that's a loop of mine, you know.
yeah,
Everything must hang on to, and then, you know, so that it opens up a very different way of viewing myself, you know. So I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. So thank you.
thank you. And what you shared is normal for everyone, so you know that it's basically when we're starting to practice this, we're starting to give our mind less control. And so that is part of what can happen when we start to meditate. The mind will start try to get back the control. And
Okay.
we're not trying to diminish our mind. We're not trying to turn off our mind. We just, this is our like our computer or our phone, like the mind. You know, it's like a beautiful operating system that's wonderful for so many things, but it's not meant to have us caged in our life.
Yeah.
So that is kind of, and that's what can often happen, usually happens in this meditation, is that the mind thinks something is important. And someone told me, and I practiced that for a while, well, try to write down a little bit when you think something is so important. And I can promise you, of 99% of the time, it was just mumbo jumbo. And that is a lot what happened in meditation in this way. The mind is taking out the trash, and we're becoming aware of a lot of trash thoughts. Not trash in terms of necessarily the bad, but they're unnecessary. So
Yeah.
we actually get to have more a refined mind, and we're starting to have much. I can promise you, the way I'm thinking now is completely different than 5 years ago.
Oh, thank you very much. I look
Yeah,
forward to exploring with this later on today.
yeah. So this was over 1 hour. Thank you for your patience and your time.
Thank you so much, Marty. Thank you. I
Yeah.
really appreciate this. Thank you so much. Mwah. Thank you. Bye-bye.